Superman, a classic. And some would argue to this day that it was the very movie that kicked down the door for modern-day superhero movies.
We all know the classic story of how he was sent to Earth from the dying planet of Krypton and became Earth's champion when he learns of his powers in his adolescent years. Like Batman and Spider-Man, everyone and their mother knows of Superman's origin. It's been done in comics, TV shows, and animated series.
Superman had been done in live action before, from cinema serials and to the 1950s George Reeve TV series.
But he had never been done in a huge, big, budgeted theatrical adventure. And this is what Warner Brothers and the Soul Kind set out to do in 1978. Director Richard Donner was hired to direct what would be Superman 1 and 2, shot back to back, as studios did this as a means of saving money so that they didn't have to shut down production between years before moving on to a sequel. Universal also did this for Back to the Future Part 2 and 3, and Peter Jackson also did this for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and Marvel shot Avengers 3 and 4 back to back.
Has this held up over time? Well, there's only one way to find out as we head back to Metropolis. Writer Mario Puzo had his work cut out for him because he penned what would become one of the most iconic superhero movies to this day.
To be able to do Superman justice, you have to be able to have a story that, while being respectful to the character and his origin, you have to make it plausible to where you have a competent story and care about the characters. I think this movie does that. We get the right amount of time needed with Clark as he grows up in Kansas discovering his powers before moving on to Metropolis and get introduced to Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, and Lex Luthor. We see that Perry is a hot-tempered news editor that likes things to be done by the book, and he wanted it yesterday. Jimmy is a teenage photographer that seems to yearn for Lois's and Perry's approval, and Luthor is prepared to do anything to stay free, even getting to a determined cop and got him derailed.
One of the early scenes that I really appreciated was the humility that Clark learned that despite these amazing powers that he has, he couldn't save his Earth father from dying.
That is good character building. You have these amazing gifts in which you can run as fast as Sonic the Hedgehog, throw a football from one end to the other without any effort, and yet you can't save the one you love.
This is something that comes back later after the death of Lois Lane.
One of the best scenes where the tension is properly built is the helicopter accident at the top of the Daily Planet. The tension builds with each time Lois slips further until she's hanging by the radio receiver. The tension is broken twice when Soup saves her with probably one of the best lines ever.
Easy, miss. I've got you.
You've got me! Who's got you?
And to saving the helicopter and its crew from certain doom. Luthor is buying up plots of deserted desert land that he intends to make more valuable by striking the San Andreas fault line with missiles that would cause Los Angeles, San Francisco, and San Diego to fall into the Pacific Ocean so that he may make his own coastline very profitable.
This is also where we're introduced to Kryptonite for the first time on screen as the only real thing that can weaken Superman. Radioactive pieces of his homeworld that renders his powers useless.
I mentioned earlier of how he felt when he couldn't save his Pa Kent, and after the sorrow that fills his heart and the earth-shattering vibrations of his primal scream, he comes to realize now, knowing what he can do with those powers, he could do something. He was hit with the realization that he couldn't be in two places at once, despite the speed he could fly at, as his focus had been stopping the first missile from striking the East Coast and then stopping further damage to trains and the Golden Gate Bridge by saving the Amtrak passenger service and a school bus, respectively. Now, I am not going to get into the scientific reasons of how and why it's not possible to turn back time by making the Earth spin in reverse on its axis. I leave that to people who are better qualified, and educated for that matter. But for the context of the scene, it shows how he uses his powers to undo the damage of the earthquake, while it was going against Jor-El's instructions of interfering in human history.
But I think many can relate to this. If you could turn back the hands of time and save the one you love, I think most people would do this. in a heartbeat.
In short, the writing holds up as a solid introduction to an incarnation of a character that is still loved and respected to this day. There were actors that were considered for the role and some that even lobbied for it, of which included Neil Diamond, Nick Nolte, Christopher Walken, and even the Terminator himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I can just see it now. Easy miss, I got you.
Casting director Lynn Stolmaster convinced Richard Donner to see unknown stage actor Christopher Reeve in a screen test. After Donner had initially said he was too young and skinny, Reeve did his screen test and stunned the director and the producers, and then proceeded to bulk up from 188 to 212 pounds during pre-production and filming to fill the suit, as he refused to wear a muscle suit. Duality. This is what the late Christopher Reeve was able to achieve flawlessly with his take on The Last Son of Krypton, which hasn't really been matched by those that succeeded him when he retired from the role after Superman 4. I feel like his portrayal was coming from an honest place of how someone would behave if they had these powers from another world, and how they would conceal their identity to protect their loved ones from fear of reprisal.
As Superman, he's strong, confident, and with surprisingly quick, dry wit.
Hi there. Something wrong with the elevator? Bad vibrations?
As Clark Kent, when he reaches the Daily Planet, he's clumsy, bumbling, stuttering, and introverted.
He even alters his posture as Clark to where he's slightly hunched over, and when he's Superman, he's stood upright, strong shoulders, and talks composed.
That is a great way of deception, but as mentioned, this is also great duality.
Chris even has his voice dubbed in for Clark during his teen years in Kansas to maintain continuity. Jeff East played teenage Clark Kent. One scene where there is just amazing, raw, emotional acting is the death of Lois Lane in Nevada. You see Superman looking on in heartbreak and dismay of not being able to reach the woman he loved in time to letting out this earth-shattering primal scream of anger and sadness before leaping to the skies. Christopher Reeve is considered by many to be the most quintessential Superman ever, from the way he portrayed the character and even how he conducted himself outside of the role, saying that actors playing protagonists should conduct themselves appropriately to set an example for the kids that watch them.
He was an incredibly gifted actor, and an even greater man, and he's sorely missed. To play the coveted roles of Superman, you have to have someone who can be both vulnerable, but also someone with a lot of moxie to boot.
When Margot Kidder was cast to play opposite Christopher Reeve, they could have not picked anyone better. She portrayed Lois as an intrepid reporter that was always looking to get to the heart of the story and would do things her way. And at the same time, she was completely swept off her feet, literally and figuratively, by this amazing being that saves her from certain death and was just wowed by him. I think most people would. Only Amy Adams from Man of Steel has ever been a decent successor to Margot, as Kate Bosworth was just poorly miscast as Lois in Superman Returns. Amy's portrayal, while being somewhat more reserved in how she spoke, still had the same attitude and moxie as Margot's performance had.
Like Chris, Margot is sadly missed. It's not easy to play the villain and yet be one of the most interesting and entertaining characters.
Gene Hackman's portrayal of the Man of Steel's arch-nemesis is something that is yet to be matched by any actor since him. Kevin Spacey had similar aspects of Hackman's performance, but his was a little darker. Whereas Jesse Eisenberg is something most people like to forget, as his performance in Batman v Superman was just woeful and was clearly a poor casting choice. Most have argued that Bryan Cranston would have been a much better fit, since he's done both comedy in Malcolm in the Middle and playing Heisenberg in Breaking Bad. Hackman's Luthor was the opposite side of the coin to Chris's Superman. Supes, while having some dry wit, was pretty much about keeping things peaceful, calm, and maintaining order, whereas Luthor was diabolically charming and charismatic.
And a complete savage.
Do you know why the number 200 is so vitally descriptive to both you and me? What? It's your weight and my IQ. Now...
Jeez, Lex, tell us how you really feel. What is there to say? He was one of the most accomplished actors in the industry. He was the Godfather.
And the fact that he brought that caliber of talent to playing Krypton's chief scientist and Superman's father is just a testament of the gravitas he brought to the role, and how he acts as Kal-El's teacher and father long after the character's death due to Krypton's destruction. His performance was reused digitally in Superman Returns, where his messages to Superman were reused in voiceovers.
An amazing actor.
Considering that this came out in the late 70s, the effects, both special and visual, still look very credible, from the green screen, to the visuals of Superman flying in between buildings, and to the miniatures used in Nevada. The practical effects of Chris flying through on wires on location looks more than credible, as it looks like he is actually flying in those scenes, particularly when he's dropping the criminal off to Officer Mooney before flying away.
The miniature work is of the talented Derrick Meddings, who made his start in working with Jerry Anderson from Fireball XL5, to my personal favourite in Stingray, and to the iconic Thunderbirds.
Derrick Meddings would not only work on 2 more Superman movies, Batman 1989, and also an array of James Bond movies, of which GoldenEye was his last movie before his death in 1995. When you watch the Hoover Dam falling apart and the water raging towards the local town, you actually believe that the miniatures are that of the local area. This was also used as stock footage in the Season 1 Knight Rider episode, Not a Drop to Drink, where Kip fires rockets from his exhaust, causing the rocks to fall and stopping the fields from being flooded. Some will make the argument that the green screen looks dated to what is capable by today's standards. And therein lies the problem. You're judging a movie of the late 70s by movies made today. Just assess it by the standards of the time of which it was made.
And for how the green screen holds up, still looks credible from my perspective.
Although I will say, even 42 years later, it's still a little jarring hearing the microphone background noise when Clark is talking to Jonathan Kent about how he's here for a reason. You'd think today, with machine learning algorithms, they would be able to remove that.
You know, son, and that is you are here for a reason.
It's John Williams. You know this by now, he's automatically a winner.
I don't think Richard Donner could have picked anyone better to do this dramatic score that has become synonymous with the character. It also acts as a character in the way that it announces to the audience that something big was about to go down, as the dramatic score begins to ramp up as Clark would rip his shirt open, revealing the giant S on his costume. And to where it acts as a moment of triumph in where Superman first reveals himself to the world when he not only saves Lois, but also the helicopter crew. One moving piece I appreciate is the very soft score that is played when he is tending to a deceased Lois, after removing her from her car, and the music just really enhances the scene with the pain of loss that is setting in. And of course, the piece that plays when Superman and Lois take to the skies. It has such a tender and romantic tone to where you get to see things from Lois's perspective, in being able to fly for the first time and see the world from a different angle.
Considering the talent of John Williams from his work on Jaws, Star Wars, and Jurassic Park, his performance on the Superman score is just amazing.
His Superman theme would be used again throughout the series, including 2006's Superman Returns, of which John Otis would build that movie score around Williams' theme.
Like the cast performances and the movie itself, the score is iconic, and no one could have done it better than John Williams.
The movie grossed a profit of $300.5 million against a budget of $55 million. adjusted for inflation for 2020, and the takings would be worth $1 billion. It was nominated for 4 Academy Awards: Best Film Editing, Best Score, Best Sound, and Best Visual Effects, of which it won the latter of the former 3. Christopher Reeve won the 1978 British Academy Award of Most Promising Newcomer to Leading Film Roles. He was praised for his performance in blending humour and gravitas as the titular character. He would go on to reprise the role in Superman 2 and 3 and the less than praised Superman 4, of which that was panned critically by fans and critics alike. Richard Donner was fired from directing Superman 2, of which they were still filming whilst the first movie premiered in theatres in December 1978. Richard Lester, who also directed the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night and its sequel Help, would take over as the director and finish off Superman 2. Superman Returns connected up with the canon of the first 2 movies, in which Brandon Routh was cast to succeed Christopher Reeve, in which he bore a striking resemblance. Although, his performance as Clark was more convincing than his Superman part of the role, which came across as flat and wooden. There wouldn't be another live-action movie adaptation of Superman until 2013, when Zack Snyder would retell Superman's origin with a very non-linear perspective, showing Clark's childhood in flashbacks as he goes on a nomadic quest of self-discovery. Played this time by British actor Henry Cavill.
Superman has been treasured on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K since 1978. I'm MJ Knight, and we went back to Metropolis for Superman.